Greetings, fellow travelers, and welcome to the Way of the Showman. I am Captain Frodo. As always, I will be your gracious host and guide along the way. And what a pleasure it is to have you all back with me here today, and particularly you. It's incredible how this season is panning out. I can't thank you all enough for reaching out. A few weeks ago, it's a little more by the time this episode comes out. Daniel Rabin one of our listeners, a fine showman and now a runner of the Circus School in Melbourne, wrote a post the other day and it just really touched me. That somebody... I was reading the post, and as I was reading it, I realized I was just really enjoying it, and I was liking where it was going. And then by the end of it, when I realized that it was kind of written to me, or channeling me, as he was writing about one of his mentors, even a mentor that he hadn't actually met, but that he saw in pictures and stuff, and just the way that he wrote it captivated me. And it's a really interesting, this gracious feeling that I get from reading and having conversations with people when I realize that some of the things that we talk about here has actually been taken on as a mode of thinking. So people go, oh, that's what Frodo talks about. Or people online will refer people to me or to the podcast or something, and it really feels like I'm carving out a niche here with something that has been kept hidden or whatever. It's just I haven't known how to approach all of this, because as you can see, you've paid attention to many of the episodes, and those of you who actually listen to the entire lot, you'll see that it does it all kind of connects together. This first season is all loose, fragmentary blog posts about certain things or whatever, and this second season here is more heavy going, perhaps because it's gone so foundational. But man, I'm impressed at how many people are actually still taking it in, and how all that is finding beautiful ways of expressing itself through collaborations with beautiful people out there. It was just Jay Gilligan about to open in New York City with Reflex, a show I've worked on, as I've mentioned so much. So yeah, it's all very, very exciting stuff, and we'll have a show opening in Perth as well here. So man, it's very, very fun. All right. Last time we spoke about the triangle eye and all this, and I'm not really going to repeat much of that. I don't know how useful it is that I summarize all these things, sometimes maybe more than others. This time, as I mentioned briefly, I am going to talk about going sort of all the way back to the beginning. I was in struggling in how to put all this season together. I wasn't sure, like, if you start at the very beginning, like I was born and then I went to the school of such and such. If you do all of that, it can invariably become a little bit boring. You go get to the meat of it, and that's why I've left this here now about finding your calling to a little bit later in the season, which is now. And even though after having introduced now the three constituents of showman and audience and the show, and how the attention connects that, the next section that I felt like I naturally should go on now was to go deeper into, starting with the showman and going deeper into the audience, trying to understand them, looking at what a show actually is, and then finally really looking at attention before we start wrapping up this whole season. But there's a couple of little this first thing will be a little regression. I will go back to the very beginning, like what is it that pulls us towards the way of the showman, or what pulls anyone towards anything. And having thought as much as I have about a lot of things, spent a lot of time alone in hotel rooms, I have thought out a way to think about that as well. And then after that, we will then we will then go into the four main elements of showmanship, which we looked at in the Anatomy of Showmanship episode a few episodes ago. Who the showman is and the one who faces the other way. We'll go into that. We will go into looking and seeing, since we are, after all, visual creatures. And then that will lead us towards a little diversion into our moral obligations, or perhaps a way to take our craft a little more seriously, see what is it we want to do with our stuff before we look at the audience. And then we will look at the kind of attitude that we want to have towards our audience. Or certainly when I say we want to have, I mean this is what I have, and I hope that this too will be useful to you. I guess I'm now doing a little summary of the next things that we will be talking about. Then we will look at art and entertainment. What is it, and how does it all connect together, before we really get into looking at attention and shows. So yeah, we still have a way to go, and I'm really glad for the response that I have been getting lately. It goes up and down, in the amount of podcasts downloaded, and all of a sudden there's like somebody finds the season, and I can see from the status, not status, the statistics of it, that somebody has just found it and downloaded like 30 episodes or whatever, which is always kind of exciting to know. Oh, right, here we go. And then just a few weeks ago, got an email from a fella in Iceland who was talking about it, and said he found it, and it's just very exciting when new people have found it and they take the time out to comment. So, alright, that's a little summary, not of what we did last week, which is normally what happens in the beginning of these episodes, but about what's about to come. So, with all that said, I'd just like to quickly point out that you can still buy me a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/CaptainFrodo, and send me an email. Tell me how you're going. And that's all I have to say for this section. So let's jump straight in and look at how to find your calling. The Little Candle. The Little Candle. This chapter is called The Little Candle because of this all the short stories and that I've written about this secret society, and they have some symbols that depict the way of the showman. I won't go into all of those in this season, I believe, but I will talk about this picture, the little candle, or finding your calling, as I named the episode, as I've been always try to write the name of the episode to really encapsulate what it is that I'm talking about, but it has been pointed out that some of the titles that I have are a little obscure. That's why every now and then the titles of episodes that you've already listened to have changed a little bit on suggestion by people or whatever. I am anyway, I digress. I wasn't supposed to say more like this. So let's look at the little candle, and what makes someone who walks with the crowd turn around and face the others. How do we describe where the desire to show comes from? Some might say it stems from the desire for status or fame, wealth, and so forth, and that may be. But to me, showmanship is more importantly a particular motivation in itself. Those other desires could be argued to be motivation for every single human activity. And maybe on some level this is true. The desires for sex and status are ubiquitous human desires. But perhaps that is why I find them to be shallow explanations for everything. Even if biologically or evolutionarily these might be what sort of got it all started. We human beings are unique in the world for understanding how evolution shaped the process of the world. But I do also believe that our particular consciousness allows us to act out more subtle and refined desires than just sex and status. I think that the desire to express oneself to express and connect to our fellow human beings through artistic or other kinds of expression, also is a powerful human desire. As we talked about in the last chapter, ancient stories told and retold are whittled down to just its most meaning-bearing essentials. This is also the way with evolution. If it's not useful for the survival and procreation of the species, it's very likely to be lost. And music and art goes back about 50,000 years, and this is just the evidence which has lasted that long. How many of Bach's compositions would have lasted that long, or any of our paintings on canvases these days? Not many, is my guess. Art and music has been with us from the start, that's what I reckon, because it's important. Sex and status are desires for just what they are, important in themselves. But the desire to create and to show those creations, share thoughts and feelings with others, is also an ancient desire. A desire to explore the meeting place between human beings, the meeting point, the area of interest. Thus, the process of showmanship is probably as ancient as we are a species. So, how to find your calling? One should not take it for granted that one will discover a true love, a deep passion in life. We all fall in love at one point or another. We have powerful desires, some that are met and some that are left unrequited. These kinds of love come and go. To find our calling, to find what resonates to the core of our being, and stays resonant for years or decades or a lifetime, is a rare and beautiful thing, and should not be taken for granted. I think of this process of finding one's way as twofold. The first is the sparking of the general drive or desire, a zeist for life. And the second step is what manifests as a calling in the world, which becomes our particular expression of that initial drive. I find this to be such a complex map that my map for this area of the way starts with a simple symbolic picture. And that is that we're all born with a little candle inside us. Just picture that. It's situated somewhere in the region of the heart, although some might feel it more in their guts. It's a small, unprotected candle. It stands firm, but it is not inside the lamp, so it carries a fragile flame that can be easily put out. Like any candle, our little candle exists to be lit. The candle is our inborn potential. Its fuel, its structure, is all about catching and carrying a flame. Once it burns, it can guide us along the way. It could seem it has a will of its own, but on closer examination, its will is our will. The little candle is not the same as life. It is closer to our will to act and interact with the world. It tells us there is something inside us, something which is part of us, which responds and resonates with the world outside us. As we meet the world, the fire of interest is sparked, and this becomes a will to act in the world and to relate to others. Once lit, the little candle becomes our pilot light. It's what burns all through the night, all through the year, always ready to light a bigger fire. Unlike the gas heaters in our houses, where all we need to do is turn up the gas and the flame grows into a roaring fire, we don't have a built-in switch or a reservoir to turn on a self-contained gas supply. We're not hardwired to any gas or fuel pipeline, and there's no limitless supply of gas or fuel inside us. Not from birth, anyway. We must seek and find this fuel in the world, and this is the second part of the twofold process. So let's look at part one, the lighting of the little candle. In an ideal progression, this candle is kindled in childhood. When lit, it's experienced as the joy of life, an active interest, and the enthusiasm for playful interactions with others and the world, and a will to act and interact. The little candle is the purest fire, and the lighting of this is perhaps the most important thing in life. Without the active, explorative interest, we get children who are lost in the world, like the way adults are lost in their midlife crisis. This kind of existential lostness is a dangerous state of being. Lighting the little candle is helped along by those who love a child, being a guide for a child from birth to a healthy individual who desires life is an enormous responsibility and a vast theme. As guides, we can help and expose them to life in all its glory, but ultimately, their candles can't be reliably reached by anyone from the outside. We can place the possible paths for passion to pursue at their feet, but the will to walk and choose and connect is an inner act which must come from them. Lighting the candle is better described as something the child discovers in themselves than as something they learn from others. From a slightly different angle than the candle, our innate tendencies, sympathies, antipathies, emotions, feelings, and desires, as well as our intellectual interests, are some of the instruments in the orchestra inside us, to just go with a different picture. And finding our way is to learn to hear all these as one. When we hear their collective outputs, all the instruments as one expression, when we hear music through all the sound of the individual instruments, listening to an orchestra, one can hear a wall of sound, or one can focus on just the bassoon or the violins, or even on individual notes. But neither of these are really the music. The music is something more than the notes of each instrument. Someone like Johann Sebastian Bach had the ability to sit down and write out his direct experience of the sublime beauty of the world through instruments. The music is not in the notes on the score. It's not inside any of the individual instruments. It's not even in the sum of all of the sounds of the orchestra. The music emerges in the experience of listening in the right way. When this happens, the many instruments all come together into something other than modulations of tone and timbre. In one moment, you are hearing sound. In the next, you are experiencing deep emotion, and that is when you are experiencing music. The many innate and somewhat cultivated tendencies inside you all vie for your attention. This might first be experienced as a wall of wants, whims, and desires, and when we get properly tuned to them, we can discover that there is a melody in there. In the chaos of emotions and feelings and thoughts and desires, there is a strange attractor. If listened to in the right way, there is music in the swirl of thoughts, feelings, and desires. And to help someone hear the music, we must show them the world. There are so many instruments playing, so many types of music, that it's hard to hear and discover. In early childhood, children tend only to hear the instruments played in their homes. And this is where the role of adults as guides come in. We are here to show the little ones the world. We can use our own inner light to show the little ones our way. And when we as children are old enough to walk on our own, we can actively explore for ourselves. Some walk with the inner conviction from the very get-go, but these are rare. With the help of those who loves us, we eventually dare to take our first steps with some confidence. Our likes and dislikes draws us towards the library, the skate bowl, the the sports field, chess clubs, maker labs, out into nature, toward a climbing wall, amateur acting, groups or band rooms. Each way station might only resonate with us for a period, but each teaches us about ourselves. At all these stations and all along the way, we meet people. Some we walk with for a long time, others briefly, and the things we see and the things we do become part of the person we're becoming. And when we eventually look back, we will find in these early explorations the seeds that grew into our way. That little candle and all the instruments that became our tune, our music. Perhaps because I'm a father, I am thinking a lot about the role of parents. So for those of you who aren't out there, you might also think of this as perhaps you're teaching someone juggling. Perhaps you know some kid who haven't been getting everything they need where they live. Whatever it is, you can substitute parent for yourself. And this bit is called Your Parents Are Your First Teachers. So all our education and schooling is part of our introduction to the world. And I don't just mean going to school as a place in the world with buildings and schoolyards, but the stories that are told in the classrooms. These become part of our wanderings in the world. In this sense, school can be a kind of travel. I'm using the term school here to mean more than just formal schools. Anyone or anything along the way can become a teacher. Some lead by examples. Some become a breath of inspiration just by encountering them in the world. And your first teachers, for good or bad, is your parents. For some, these first teachers are pretty shitty. Others, such as myself, got luckier. Growing up with a father who was a magician and a mother who was running a Waldorf or Steiner kindergarten, I was pretty lucky. My parents didn't question my desire to pursue the craft of showmanship. I also had an excellent experience of school, and it presented me with idiosyncratic and passionate teachers. The way a Steiner Waldorf school takes a child's developing needs as a starting point for the curriculum had me feeling like I was on a slowly breaking wave of discovery as I gradually awoke to the world. And as I have come to understand this experience of a happy, supporting meeting with the world from both parents and teachers, this is surprisingly rare. There are so many terrible life situations kids have to deal with. Many might only be dimly aware of the many experiences, choices, and possible paths that exist in the world. To them, the world is like a book they don't know how to read. Your ability to find your way is greatly improved if your childhood successfully teaches you how to discover the many chapters and passages of the world and how to read them. Even in the midst of my positively experienced upbringing, I remember being at school and having to do some work related to the real world. Maybe we had to write an assignment about what we wanted to be when we grew up or something like that. And I remember sitting on my wooden chair, chewing on my pencil, filled with this feeling of being trapped, a strange feeling of being lost. Not lost like in the forest or the wilderness, but lost in a small space. They asked me to go wherever I wanted with my mind, yet I had no idea what options there were. The only ones that sprung to mind was things like carpenter or plumber or sitting in a checkout of a supermarket, all of which depressed me. Since my father always had another job on top of being a magician, I naturally thought I would have to have one as well, and that prospect scared me. In hindsight, it might not have been lostness I felt, and perhaps I already had an inkling of my true way, so that when I looked further, trying to find something else, everything else just felt lacking. Showing the child the world was leading a child through the world by teaching them about history, the biographies of extraordinary women and men and the many crafts they practiced or invented up through time can be inspiring and help opening the world for the little ones, showing and telling them about the times and communities which the individuals lived and participated in. Philosophy can be powerfully inspirational. The stories of the many thoughts people have had, the history of humanity's thinking, also geography, the many places there are around the globe, and what the people in those places did and do. All this is excellent for instilling further degrees of possibilities and potential freedom. And the more you've heard about, the better chance you have of finding your way to something which resonates with you. As a guide to your own child or a friend, or as a mentor to a budding artist, there is only so much you can do. A big part of the spark or discovery of the music in the noise comes from the child or wanderer themselves. As I said, there is no done deal, fully reliable way to reach inside someone else and get their pilot light burning, even under perfect circumstances. Being taken as far and wide around the world as can be expected, many people still don't find their true calling. They find no passionate resonance, something which fulfills and makes them experience themselves and their interactions with the world as meaningful. A lot of people end up in a job with a craft they have no passion for, which leaves one without the feeling of meaning and purpose, and this is a precarious and potentially dangerous life situation. The famous psychologist Carl Gustav Jung said that the majority of those who came to see him weren't dealing with clinical neurosis, but with a lack of meaning in their life. Finding your way might be the most important thing you find in your life. And it all begins with the lighting of the little candle. Finding your way can in many ways be considered a blessing, a lucky break, since finding something which makes you feel like what you do not only is right for you, but also good for the world, is one of the great triumphs of human existence. For your child, like with yourself, let your feelings and desires guide you. If some idea sparks a fire in you, just follow it. And if something in the world kindles an interest in you, aim for it, explore it. It might be a flash in the pan, but even if it turns out to not be where you ultimately end up, having felt the resonance, having felt it ignite something inside you in a positive way, giving you a sense of engagement is a clue, a pointer towards the X, which marks the spot. You felt something that could have been your spark, but if nothing else is tuned, then it's tuned you towards feeling it. The moments of inspiration are many, but the result is the same. A spark is lit. The warm feeling of attraction permeates your chest and resonates with your soul. Once the pilot light is lit, the explorations of the world crossfades naturally into seeking the greatest source of fuel for the little candle to connect to. Tiny flames are hard to see. The little candle has a tiny flame. In a vibrant world with flashing lights and colors that are just all so bright, it is hard to notice this little flame. It is hard to see one's true will, to find how we really enjoy spending our lives. So much in the world shines brighter. Career, money, all our base desires, all these compete for our attention and focus. I just learned the other day that focus is a Latin word, and it just means a hearth or a fire, like the fireplace. This is the focus. Anyway, sometimes we might need a bit of darkness to see our flame. Sometimes we might need a bit of darkness to see our flame, because tiny flames are hard to see. Sometimes our own flame becomes visible when some tragic event occurs that plunges us into a dark interior space. And in this dark interior space, it's easier to see a tiny flame. In this space it might even seem bright. In a breakup, at the news of serious illness, your own or of someone you love, with the death of a loved one, this awful dark seems to bring our true desires to the forefront. Sometimes we become aware of it when we spend time on our own, sometimes through meditation or contemplation. And chances of finding something increases when one sets off time to specifically look for it and pay attention to it. In therapy, in occult explorations, by asking Alan Watts's question, what if money was no object? What if money was no object? If you remove money from the equation and just ask yourself what you want to spend your life doing, remembering that each day that passes brings you one day closer to dying, what will you spend your days? What will you spend your days doing? You might get told by a woman in a white coat with a stethoscope around her neck that the closing date for your life show will come in the next 6 to 12 months, maybe sooner. Few things reorganizes your priorities like this. Sometimes the doctor's predictions are wrong, and you get to live an additional lifetime. Some of those who have gone through this cite it as the most illuminating experience of their lives. The reminding of death's reality can become a rebirth. So let's look at resonance. At some point along the way, with our inner active interest sparked, our candle burning, we begin using its limited halo of light to guide us on our explorations of the world. With a pilot light burning, the aim of our wandering becomes finding the fuel for the greater fire. Now we seek to deepen our relationship to what specifically resonates with us out there in the world. I find resonance is a good way to kind of picture what happens as we seek the fuel for our greater connecting fire. And going back to the music analogy, we can picture resonance by picturing a guitar that is tuned to E major. And if you play the guitar next to a piano, and not if you play the guitar, but if you place the guitar, if you take the guitar and put it on the piano or right next to a piano, and then with the guitar tuned to the E major chord, if you then play an E major chord on the piano, the guitar kind of begins to play by itself. It sort of starts to sing in harmony. The strings on the guitar starts to resonate and vibrate harmonically with vibrations from the piano. And if we then picture ourselves as guitars tuned to different chords, our exploratory search of the world is in part to increase our chances of getting close to the pianos playing chords resonant with our own particular tuning. To be able to pick up these vibrations, we must be open to it. Our fingers must not be muffling our own strings. We must be ready to receive. Enthusiasm. This is a core thing in my thinking. I think about that word a lot. We experience the inner fire of the little candle and then the fuel of the world as a spectrum of excitement and interest. The spectrum goes from the smallest feeling of curiosity, eagerness, attraction, or enjoyment to powerful and all-consuming emotions manifesting as zeal or fervor and deep, all-consuming passion. Both the concepts or the words zeal and fervor are often associated with religious conviction. But there is nothing inherently religious or supernatural about the words, but the strength of the emotions are of the kind which is associated with religious matters, simply because they're so powerful. As we approach mystery and the deepest questions, we find religious language whispering from the shadows. Zeal means great energy or enthusiasm in pursuit of a cause or an objective, and fervor is intense and passionate feeling. And I see all of these modes of attention and attraction, interest, like I see them as modes of attention and attraction, like interest, fascination, charm, passion, zeal, fervor, and so forth. They're all aspects of enthusiasm. And the dictionary's first definition of enthusiasm is powerful excitement. And the second one is a religious fervor supposedly resulting directly from divine inspiration. Enthusiasm is complemented by a feeling that you've found the right thing to be excited about. And this again leads to an active impulse or a transmitting quality. You want or even need to share it. When one is deeply enthusiastic, one feels intense and eager enjoyment. But in a sense, this experience is so powerful it spills over into a desire for outward expression. It has a contagious element, like how a fire in the wild once kindled starts other fires. The inner fire can spread to others. Enthusiasm, we feel it powerfully. We feel it's right, and we want to share it. This kind of enthusiasm can take over your whole being, color every mode of your thinking, speaking, and interacting with the world. I am finding this really fascinating, both that we sort of feel it powerfully, but also this sort of feeling that it's right for you, and that this is something that we want to share. I think this is a core thing of this wanting to express something, the excitement with having found something. Enthusiasm, as it's hinted by, might sort of have divine roots, certainly in its origins of the words, because the root of the word enthusiasm is divine. Its etymology takes us back to the ancient Greeks, like many things in the world. Looking at this root meaning, we get a picture of how they understood this state of mind, and also where they perceived the feeling to stem from. The noun enthusiasm comes from the Greek word enthusiasmos. I don't know if that's how they pronounced it, but that meant or means inspired or possessed by a god. Enthusiasmos, enthusiasm, means inspired by or possessed by a god. Theos is Greek for God, and en means in or within. Enthusiasmos, possessed or inspired by a god. The Greeks experienced enthusiasm as the work of a god working from within them and then speaking to them from inside themselves. And this experience maps perfectly onto something I'm sure all creatives have experienced, the feeling of ideas being given to them whilst in a creative process, that they aren't conscious creations, but gifts that often appear fully formed. I have related two of my experiences of this kind, first the manifesto and then the triangle eye gesture. Both of these felt like they just came floating through the air on a plank and then fell off into my mind, to then reveal themselves as powerfully fruitful avenues for my creative developments. And I think it is this aspect, the way inspiration arrives, that the ancient Greeks placed into their word and gave it a divine identity. A god had a personality for the Greeks. There were many of them. Some were angry, some got jealous, but still they were all gods, flaws and all, like the Muses, who were Greek goddesses of poetic inspiration, of song, dance, and memory. The Greeks believed that an artist and thinkers were at the mercy of them, and their gifts of inspiration for creativity, wisdom, and insight. And these are examples of the kind of God the ancient Greeks would have imagined working inside of them. And Romans, they also had a sort of, they were using the word genius in some particular ways. And this feeling of enthusiasm's origin as something internal and divine was also expressed in the later Roman concept of genius. Today we view genius as something that resides within us, within certain individuals. We think perhaps first of Einstein, Leonardo da Vinci, and Darwin, people of intellect. But if we think for a few moments, we will also think of geniuses geniuses of the body, like Martha Graham or Serena Williams, or Muhammad Ali. And then there are geniuses of the arts, like Johann Wolfgang von Goethe, Margaret Atwood, Ursula Le Guin, or Emily Dickinson. And in the Roman times, It was felt that each person had their own genius, but this genius was a sort of external entity residing within the person. It's an external entity residing within the person, a kind of spirit, a spirit being which was yours alone. The spirit was present from one's birth, but was its own entity. Each person was guided and inspired by this genius residing within them. It wasn't only people who had geniuses, places had genius too. Genius loci. Powerful objects like volcanoes also had a spirit inhabiting them. Genius was the thing in the landscape that spoke to you and made you feel tiny or connected, or just feel the sense of immense awe which certain majestic geographies do. It doesn't have to be just Grand Canyon or the spectacular fjords of Norway. The deep felt genius of the landscape and nature can be felt in any forest, any field and place where the landscape all of a sudden resonates with us through deep emotions and a feeling of connection. And in a Zen kind of way, you can cultivate a way of looking at the world which can reveal this genius in all aspects of nature, or beyond that, to all of existence. One aspect I like about this way of looking at genius is that we once again can find room for humility. The ideas are not just ours. They spring from something greater than ourselves. The ideas come more readily or are of greater significance the more one is in touch with this higher version of oneself. The part of us which is above the individual flaws and crooked desires. The part of us that gets the work done when a lower, more human part of ourselves just want to doom scroll on Instagram or Facebook. And this brings us to this excellent concept by Brian Eno, where Brian Eno calls it not genius but scenius, as in the scene, like I'm hanging out down, what's the scene? So, and there's a little quote from him saying that scenius is like genius, only embedded in a scene rather than in a gene. So Brian Eno said that someplace. I find Brian Eno's idea of scenius quite genius. It resonates strongly with the idea we find in both the word enthusiasm and a Roman version of genius, since both of those also points to genius creation stemming from more than the individual expressing it. No ideas spring from nowhere. They don't just arise from nothing inside a lone genius. Any persona is embedded within the cultural grammar of their surroundings. The societal structures and the culture they grow up in and resides within influences and stimulates them. Those who have moved around, emigrated from India to England and then on to Armenia, will be influenced by all three cultures, as well as the impact of the three on each other, as well as the travel. In short, there is an influence from the outside world. Zooming in a little closer, we find each individual artist embedded within a scene. This can be a very particular group of friends in the real world. Maybe it's the people you went to university with, the gang you went to circus school with, the crowd you hang with at festivals or at the pitch, or your local group of like-minded artists, academics, freaks or geeks. The scene influencing you is larger than your immediate or spread out group of acquaintances. It can be a virtual scene, accessed through the internet. It can also be the scene you find in your explorations of history, literature or academia. Your scene can be the people influencing you. Maybe place plays a role too, genius loci. I know Philip Glass cites living in New York as a powerful inspiration to his work, and the competitions and the comparison to others that we go through in the scene, or whatever the conversations, the conversational responses from what you see people in your scene do, inspires and eggs you on. Brian Eno says that when he was an art student, he was encouraged by the schools and the art world to believe that there were a few great masters in each field, like Picasso, Kandinsky, Rembrandt and Giotto. Each of these mysteriously appeared out of nowhere, and solely by their individual genius they produced artistic revolutions. But what Eno discovered was that each of these so-called lone geniuses were embedded in and in conversation with fertile scenes involving lots of people, and not all of them were fellow artists, or artists at all. They could be editors, philosophers, curators, business entrepreneurs, scientists, or religious thinkers. In short, any kind of muse or persons which spurred this lone genius to stretch beyond themselves, to please, interest, celebrate, or converse with, respond to, impress, to seduce, or be seduced by. Eno saw that all these influences came together in a work of genius. An important part of what created a genius was their ability to successfully and artfully combine all these inputs into specific works of art, or their general artistic outputs. And in this way, the outstanding individual achievements were part of an ecology of talent. What we think of as genius is in fact more like the intelligence and intuition of a whole cultural scene. Genius is the communal or group form of the concept of genius. And I find this genius concept very useful. It keeps me humble. It keeps me connected to the world. It also helps me to focus my attention on this as a specific phenomenon in the world. I become aware of my influences. I become aware of the fact that each conversation I have with people in the flesh or online is part of my scene, and if I train my mind on it, I can better sense the genius of what is going on. Each person will have their own genius. I am living amongst my peers in the worldwide network of performers, showfolk, and creative souls, but I'm also actively engaging in my interest beyond my immediate field, through university lectures, through TED Talks, through books I read, through poetry and music that moves me, and all of this is part of my artistic output. It's the genius which is around me, internalized in me, experienced as enthusiasm, as the Roman divine genius, my divine double, which inspires me to go beyond myself. Inspiration. Yeah, to be enthused is to be inspired, and in the etymology of inspire we find a very similar story as in enthusiasm and genius. The Latin inspirare means to breathe or blow into. The person or being which the ancients believed this blowing was thought, who did the actual blowing, was thought to be a god or some kind of supernatural entity, very much like the Roman concept of genius. Famously, the Christian God breathed life into Adam. He breathed his own breath into Adam, and then some of that breath remained in Adam as life, as a spark, as a little candle perhaps. And from there, the little candle pilot light seeks something greater to ignite for the full enthusiastic experience. Maybe this is what Jim Morrison from The Doors begged his baby to light when he was rocking the world back in 1967. Maybe the baby he was calling upon was his genius, his muse. He wanted her to blow him some inspiration. Or perhaps he sought a higher perspective. He could also just have been talking about some hooking up after the show to smoke some weed. But, as with all great poetry, its strength lies in functioning on many levels at once. But it all starts with a breath in. The very first thing that happens in life when we enter the world is breathing in. The first oxygen for our fire. After our first great struggle of birth, leaving the comforts of our mother's womb, comes the first in-breath before the first big cry going outwards, announcing our arrival. There is a new being in the world, a new player on the scene. Most of us need a whole lot of in before we can let anything come out. Even when you have a scream inside you that wants to get out into the world, it's good to know what's already out there. Maybe it turns out that the way you scream naturally comes out uncannily like someone else's scream which came before you. You might want to know the way the other screamers scream, like the magician finding his unique card move creation already existed and was already described in the Jinx Magic magazine by Ted Anneman, sometime in the 40s perhaps. If the magician had known, he could perhaps have gone further by not having to reinvent what already existed. To know the world and the other screamers, past and present, you will also find others to scream with and learn from. You can scream with the past, you can scream with your peers in the real world. Through this, you can modulate your scream to fit into the screaming choir, or you might discover how to modulate your scream to not be like the others, to scream solo, so to speak. You discover how to scream your particular scream into the future. The novel scream is a modulation, an education of your inner fire. Your scream is based on what you see around you in the world and what you can find of light within you. I breathe in. I breathe out. Merge without with within. I seek and learn to know my scene. Then I scream. My own scream. I breathe in. I breathe out. Merge without with within. I seek and learn to know my scene. Then I scream. My own scream. When we want the fire to grow, we breathe on. We breathe on it. As anyone who's tried making a fire in the wild knows, the beginning is fragile. What those of us who have made fires or have fireplaces know is that if you breathe too hard on a tiny flame, it can die. Breath is the most common way to snuff out the candle. The blowing from the genius is gentle in the start. Once the fire has taken hold, you can blow as hard as you like. You fan the flames and they grow. This happens again and again for a creative person. Any artist caught up in creation can get completely consumed by the project, and for the period the creation colors every aspect of your life. The little candle becomes white hot like a welding flame, fusing you and your genius. So let's look at the spark and this calling, because there's so much more that can resonate with you or call to you from the way. So much there that can resonate from the way of the shaman, or call you to the way than just to being the performer in, raggedy pants manipulating his bowler hat, cigar and cane in the circus ring. There are big tops, trucks, stages, sawdust, girls and boys and freaks of every shade, color, gender, ability and inclinations. The workers who build it all, the mechanics who fixes the rides and the vehicles, the seamstresses and the designers of costumes and canvas tents, the drunkards and poets, acrobats and gymnasts, health nuts who live the purest of pure lives dedicated to the bodies like they were the temple for their gods, people who work out in their underpants whilst strange clowns with tiny square red noses and dirty singlets covered in tattoos watch them, drinking black coffee and chain-smoking cigarettes. There are glorious facades of fun, huge corporate-looking big tubs filled with every shape of fantasy and glorious skills and dreams. There are strange, exotic places, animals, unusual skills, impressive daredevils. Everything fun and exciting is rolled up and packed onto trucks and driven onto the next showground. There really is something for everyone. Which spark will catch you? What will ignite you as you walk by along your way? Will you step right up and let it burn you? The experience that suddenly seems to be calling you has usually lived in you for a very long time. In the end, it doesn't matter how you got there, but that as you step into the ring, whatever shape it might take, it feels like home. It's all about connecting to something greater. And the luckiest gets glimpses of their candle and what kindles their enthusiasm already in childhood. I was this lucky. When people come up to me after my shows and say, "Wow, you are lucky that gets to live a life like this," I wholeheartedly agree, though my luck is not that I get to live this life. I worked really hard to get to live this life. It's my life's work, the sum of all of my efforts. I got this lucky because I worked hard, and my luck was that I found it early. I was well on my way with my enthusiasm burning in my heart, whilst many others were only dimly aware, if at all, of their little candles. We all walk with each other. We all have these little candles inside us. Some never gets lit. Others go out along the way. Many don't know whether their candle is burning or not. They've not asked the questions. They've not spent enough attentive time alone in the dark to see it. They might have been alone, but in their aloneness they were too busy focusing on what was beyond their solitude, too focused on the diffused lights beyond their circle of darkness, to notice the little light at their very center. Sitting at the dark carnival, looking at the lights of the town beyond the carnival's edge, instead of what faint flame burnt inside themselves. Those that turn around to face the others, to call upon their attention because they believe they have something to show, have seen the little candle's illumination and connected to and kindled a bigger fire. They have connected to something greater. They have joined the greatest show on earth. Yeah, there you have it. That's today's episode about finding your calling. You know, it's not easy finding that burning candle in the beginning that's so small, and then finding the huge reservoir that a lot of us who listens to this podcast, perhaps most, have found it in the world of shows, in the show business, in the show world. Anyway, I don't have much else to say. Then please, if you do enjoy this, share it with others. I have lost the ability to, as I have said before, I can't do any ads anymore, so Facebook is not getting any more money from me, even though I would have liked to, which is weird. I thought they would take it from anyone, but anyway. So please tell a friend that we exist. If you feel generous, buy me a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/CaptainFrodo, and that's all I have to say. I thank you for being here, and until next time, all that's left to say is take care of yourself and those you love, and I hope to see you along the way.